Started here with our December webinar. Today we're going to talk about budgeting. It's called Budgeting 101. So let me just start with a word of prayer, and then we'll dive right in. Lord, thank you for this day and this opportunity just to come together and use the technology that we have to be able to just dive into our finances. Lord, I pray that you would use this time to teach us something today, Lord, about our own finances. Pray that each person on the call today would be able to take something from this and apply it to their situation and hopefully become a better steward of their finances for you, Lord. Just bless this time that we have together today. In your name we pray. Amen. I'd like to welcome each one of you that is on with us today. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're talking about Budgeting 101, just a basic budgeting process, and hopefully find a way to really simplify that process for you and make it something that you can use and apply to your own situation. I think we've all made budgets before. We've written them down on paper. We've put things together that look really good on paper, only for it to fail, a month or two down the road. So today we're really going to try to focus in on how to put together the budget, but then also how to implement that so that it becomes your, a consistent monthly spending plan that you can succeed with, that's easy to use, and easy to really put it into practice so it doesn't just end up something that ends up in the garbage after a few weeks or a few months. So first thing, if we can get to the next slide here. There we go. Proverbs 13 says, "One man pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth." So that's just such a great piece of wisdom there. It kind of lends to that thought of we call it keeping up with the Joneses. Are we going to, with our finances, are we going to use our finances to pretend to be rich and yet have nothing, or are we going to be good stewards of our money, pretend to be poor, make it look like we're poor, yet have great wealth? And so it all starts with the basic budget or that basic spending plan, if you'd rather call it that. So where to start with the budget here? First thing you want to do, if you're married or you have kids, first thing I would do is have a family meeting or a meeting with your spouse at the very least and establish your goals. A couple things with goals. We can have short-term goals, which would be maybe you have a goal for the next month. Maybe your goal for the next month is just to live within a budget. Maybe you have a goal for after 6 months to have an emergency fund of so much saved up. Maybe your goal after a year is to have enough to buy a car, or maybe enough to pay off your car loan, or whatever the case may be, whatever your situation you're in. Establish some goals. If you don't have any goals in mind when you're going through and establishing your budget, it becomes a lot easier to fall off track if you don't have an end result in mind when you're setting up your finances. So have some short-term goals, but then also have some long-term goals for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. Do you want to be able to buy a house or start a business, or have enough saved so kids can go to college or be able to retire in a certain time frame? Maybe have a couple short-term goals and then 1 or 2 more major long-term goals that you can really use to develop your monthly spending plan and be able to have something to shoot for as you're going through the month-to-month budgeting process. Then, once you've established your goals, go ahead and take a financial inventory. And so this would include maybe gathering bank statements for maybe even the last 2 or 3 months. Your bank statements are really going to show how much do you spend on groceries, how much do you spend in gas, how much do you spend eating out, how much do you spend on clothing, entertainment, all those kinds of things that aren't necessarily a monthly bill. You're going to be able to calculate a pretty good estimate or even just an average of what you spend on those miscellaneous expenses. So you really want to find a couple months of statements and find what your actual spending habits are for each of those areas. And then go ahead and gather together debt statements, so a recent statement from any debts that you have, your house, your cars, credit cards, student loans, medical bills. Try to find a recent statement from the last month that would show who you owe, how much you owe, what kind of interest rates, monthly payments you're paying on each one of those. If you can't find statements, or maybe are at the point where you don't get statements from the creditors anymore, go ahead and pull a copy of your credit report. That would show who you owe and how much you owe at the very least, and it would show monthly payments on there. It's probably not going to have interest rates on there, but if you have a bunch of debt that's outstanding that you maybe don't even know, it's just older debts that you don't know how much you owe, go and pull a copy of your credit report. You can do this once a year for free if you go to annualcreditreport.com. So annualcreditreport.com will allow you to go in and pull a copy of your credit report from each of the 3 credit bureaus once a year. So if you want to pull all 3 of them all at once each year, or spread it out over a couple of months, maybe every 4 months you go and pull one of the 3 credit reports. They should be all fairly similar. But that's one thing looking into this new year. If you haven't seen your credit report in a long time, maybe make it a habit of every January 1st, every new year, you have a habit of just going and pulling your credit report just to see what's on there, make sure nothing is on there that shouldn't be on there, just to give you a good idea of where you're at as far as your debt goes. So you want to have bank statements, debt statements, or your credit report, and then just go ahead and calculate assets. How much is your house worth compared to how much you owe? How much are your cars worth compared to how much you owe? How much do you have in retirement accounts or savings? Those kinds of things, and just make a list of all your assets, just to kind of have a good idea of where you stand. Maybe you go and maybe the tax value of your house isn't the most accurate thing, but if you go to all kinds of different websites that might give you a pretty good idea of your house, if you want to go to real estate websites, or Zillow.com will give a pretty rough estimate of what your house might be worth to find those things. So now you have a kind of a total financial inventory put together. Next step would be to go ahead and make adjustments where necessary. So go and find some problem areas. When you're going through your bank statements, maybe you notice that you spend a lot more eating out than you thought you did, or maybe you spend a lot more on groceries or entertainment or gas, those kind of things. Maybe your credit card debt is climbing as the months go by. Find those problem areas. Maybe your savings has been dwindling as opposed to growing each month. Rick Huff, who's a CPA, he's from down in Virginia. He talks about the 10-10-10-70 plan, which basically means you put 10% into giving or your tithe. You put 10% into retirement accounts or investment accounts for retirement, and then you have 10% going into an emergency fund every month, and then what's left you use for taxes and living expenses. So when you think of it that way, you're giving, you're setting yourself up for retirement, and you're putting yourself in position to be able to be prepared for emergencies. Leaving 70% for taxes and living expenses, obviously once your taxes are taken out, we're probably down to more like 45 or 50% of your gross income is left for living expenses, which doesn't seem like a lot, but imagine what you could do if you were only living on half of your income coming in. What you could do to put yourself in a position to retire and be prepared for emergencies and pay down debts. If you can squeeze everything down in your monthly budget where you're setting yourself up for success long-term and short-term financially, that's the ideal position to be in. So maybe savings is an issue that needs to be addressed. Overspending in areas, maybe that's something that needs to be addressed. Finding wants versus needs. Are you overspending in clothing? Is that something where you need to determine, is this something that we just want, or is this something that we really need? Is your cable or DirecTV, is that something that is a want, or is that something you really need? If you're really trying to strip everything down and put yourself in the best position possible, going through all of those expenses and determining, what really is a need, and going from there can put you in a really good position to be able to succeed financially. Next thing I would do, now that you have all your expenses laid out on a monthly basis, you've made adjustments, you've identified areas that need to be changed, you've adjusted some numbers, then here comes probably the most important part out of all of this, in my opinion, as far as budgeting goes. First, putting all the expenses into categories. So first category would be your fixed expenses, which those are the things that are never going to change, or not change a whole lot anyway. So things like your mortgage or rent payment, utilities, your debt payments, maybe your cell phone bills, those kinds of things, they're going to be the same or relatively the same every month, whether you like it or not. You have to pay them. You get a bill, and you pay the bill every month, and nothing ever really changes. So you have that one category. Then you have the more flexible expenses, things that are a little bit more variable from month to month. They're going to change depending on how that month went. Things like groceries and gas or household needs, things like entertainment, eating out, clothing, all those kinds of things. You don't get a bill for your groceries. You don't get a bill for your eating out. It's just spending that happens on a regular basis throughout the month. So putting all those things into a category, now you kind of have things separated out. Your fixed expenses, they're never going to change. Your flexible expenses, those are the things that you have a little bit of control over. Other things, haircuts, pet food, personal care, all that kind of stuff. So now that you have them categorized a little bit, even just those two categories, now executing the spending plan, here is where we talk about putting that piece of paper into action, or making that paper budget come alive. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Maybe you can think of other ideas that would work better for you. I usually talk about either multiple checking accounts or the envelope system. That if you guys know Dave Ramsey, he would use the envelope system. In our house, my wife and I use multiple checking accounts as opposed to the envelope system. So basically we're using virtual envelopes. So essentially we have 5 or 6 different checking accounts at our bank. All of our income basically goes into one checking account, which we use for our fixed expenses. So all the income comes pouring into one checking account, and from that checking account we leave in that checking account everything we need for our fixed expenses, for our mortgage, for our utilities, for our cell phones, for debt payments, all that kind of stuff. We leave in that one main checking account. Then we have a second checking account where, based on our budget, every paycheck or every month, we transfer the amount of money we need for groceries, gas, or household, toothpaste or deodorant or shampoo, all that good stuff. We have a second checking account, or if you want to use an envelope, having a separate envelope with cash in it for your groceries, gas, and household needs. Then maybe you have a third checking account for some of that miscellaneous spending, your entertainment, eating out, clothing, those kinds of things. Based on that budget that you come up with, how much you can afford to spend in this area, put that in that third checking account. Every paycheck, transfer what you need for that particular category into a third checking account. And then maybe you have a fourth checking account just for some miscellaneous things. If you want to have one set up for minor car or home repairs, or the haircuts, those kind of things that maybe don't happen every month, but they're not necessarily emergency fund type categories. So maybe you have money set aside from each paycheck that kind of goes into this miscellaneous unexpected expense checking account from there. And then you have your savings account, which I think we might talk about this a little bit later too, about even having two separate savings accounts. But having that savings account for your emergency fund, going back to the beginning, we talked about having 10% of your gross income go into an emergency fund. So if you can transfer, from every paycheck, that 10% or whatever that, as you're developing your budget, whatever that amount of money is that you can afford to put in your emergency fund, having that savings account. So right there's 4 checking accounts and 1 savings account. And you may need others. You may need an extra checking account or an additional savings account, depending on what your goals are. For example, let's say one of your short-term goals was to be able to buy a car with cash in 6 months or a year. You don't want that money mixed in with your emergency fund savings, so maybe you have another savings account set up to be able to set money aside for some of those short and long-term goals that way. Maybe you have an extra checking account set up because you have specific expenses for school that need to be paid throughout the year, or maybe you want to have a separate checking account for Christmas expenses. So you're saving $100 throughout the year for Christmas each month. Something along those lines. You can really do as much or as little as you want with this. But the way it's worked for my wife and I is to just have multiple checking accounts. We basically I have 4 or 5 debit cards in my wallet, each one of them written on with a Sharpie which category they're for. And it's an easy way for us to track our spending and really fix our expenses that are more flexible. It really prevents us from overspending in areas like eating out or entertainment, things that can easily be overspent on if we know we only have a set amount of money in that account for that expense. So here's just a few tips as you're putting this together, as you're setting this up. First of all, set realistic, achievable goals. If you set a goal for yourself to be able to buy a house with cash in 6 months, that's probably pretty unrealistic, depending on what kind of house you're looking for. But obviously, that's probably pretty unrealistic, and you're just setting yourself up for failure. So make sure you set realistic, achievable goals. I usually would try to say don't depend on bonuses or raises, but maybe when you get those, stash them away in savings or use them to help reach whatever your goals are. But don't build those things, commissions. Be conservative with your estimates for income if your income isn't consistent. so that you can be realistic with your budget and not come up short every month. Include your spouse and your family, like I talked about earlier. Include your spouse and your family in the plan, in the meeting, to set this all up, so that everybody's in the loop. Even having your kids involved, letting them know that, money doesn't grow on trees. And I know when I was a kid, I used to think that mom and dad could just write a check, because, to buy whatever they wanted for me, not realizing that there's only a certain amount of money in the checking account to start with. So including your kids, just letting them know the plan, the financial plan, keeping them in the loop can certainly help. With debt payments, try to use the snowball process with debts. I put debt payments in that fixed expense category because I think, with credit cards especially, obviously those payments are going to go down as you pay down the debt, the minimum payments are. But if you can set yourself up on a fixed payment plan with each of those credit cards or those debts, or usually what I would say is pay all the minimums on everything to start with, except one. Maybe the smallest one you make a double payment on until it's paid off. And then once you're done paying off that one debt, take whatever payment you were sending to them, snowball it onto the next payment. So now you're paying basically tripling the payment on the next debt, and so on. Just keep that snowball process moving so that you can get rid of your debts in a reasonable amount of time. You can, it doesn't have to be credit cards. You can do that with student loans, auto loans, any debts that you have. Pay the minimums on everything except for one. Make big payments on that one until you get it paid off, and then take that payment and apply it to the next one as an additional payment, and keep that process going. Here's one thing that I would highly recommend is with your emergency fund, keep that at a separate bank, a separate financial institution, bank, credit union, whatever you like to use. Yes, it may take extra time and effort to get the money to the savings account to start with, each paycheck or each month. But at the same time, if you have all of your accounts at one bank, including your emergency account, it might be, for some of us, it might be tough to be able to put that money in the emergency savings account, but then it becomes almost too easy to take it out, and it's tough to get out of that habit of leaving the money in savings. So if you can have that emergency fund set up at a totally separate bank, and have it, across town where it's not so easily accessible, that really solidifies that emergency fund, so that it really does have to be an emergency for you to go and get the money out of that savings account for whatever the emergency is. So if you can set it up at a separate bank or in a separate town, do whatever you can to make that a little bit difficult to access. So it's not just a matter of transferring money online, where they're sitting in your living room. So keep that separate if you can. And then, just with every purchase that you make, really ask yourself, get in the habit of asking yourself, is this a want or is this a need? I have an addiction to sports. So you can spend a lot of money on sports, going to games or buying memorabilia or all those kinds of things. And I really have to ask myself, is this something that I can afford? Is this a need? Usually the answer is no, obviously. You got to have some of that. That's where your entertainment fund comes into play. But if there's, really any spending that isn't a bill, even at the grocery store, asking yourself, is this, the buy 5 packages of Oreos and get one free, is that really a need, or is that just taking advantage of a good deal and just filling a want, basically? So if you can get in the habit of asking yourself that question with every purchase, I guarantee you'll start to see financial picture turn around if you're struggling right now. And really, a lot of this comes down to just willingness to change your lifestyle. A lot of times, when we're living paycheck to paycheck, really a few changes in lifestyle, and that first verse from Proverbs, wanting to look wealthy or keep up with your neighbors or family or friends, you're not wanting to look poor. It's okay to change your lifestyle and make some sacrifices financially. Chances are your friends or neighbors will probably envy you for making those changes because they can't do them, can't make those changes themselves and make those sacrifices themselves. So, again, Dave Ramsey, if you've listened to him before, he talks about 80% of money is behavior. Success with money, 80% is behavior and 20% is head knowledge. So you don't need to have all the education or head knowledge when it comes to money to be successful financially. A lot of it comes down to lifestyle and your behaviors. So be willing to make sacrifices and to change your lifestyle to do it, and you will succeed. And then we'll just end with one more verse here from Matthew, chapter 6, verse 24. It says, no one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So, there's a lot of things in our world today that make us want things, or want those vacations, or want those the nice TVs, or all kinds of things. But make sure that you have your priorities straight when it comes to your finances, so that you're not trying to serve both God and money. Be responsible with your finances, and there's blessing in finances. God will bless us if we are using our finances to glorify Him and to give back to the Lord. So, if you have questions on any of this, or if you want to go through your situation in depth, feel free to shoot me an email. There's my email address, just nathan@familylifecredit.org, or feel free to call us anytime as well. There's our number, 800-747-9307. And then my personal extension is 102. I'd be more than happy to go through your budget with you and help you come up with a plan that hopefully you can implement and use it to reach your financial goals. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us today. I pray each one of you has a Merry Christmas, and please feel free to call if you have any questions along the way.